Welcome to episode 148 of Destination Linux. This is a podcast using, learning, educating, and sharing our passion for Linux and open source. Destination Linux is meant for all experience levels, whether you're a guru, a sudo, or you just heard about Linux today. We hope you can find some usefulness and enjoyment in the show, even if it's just from us trolling Michael. My name's Noah, and with me today is the rest of my arc containing the Linux geeks. They are Ryan, Zeb, and Michael. Ryan, how's your week been?
My week has been fabulous. I've done plenty of trolling of Michael, which is always fantastic.
Good,
but most
as required.
Importantly, yeah, I have been playing with the Pinebook Pro. I've been putting it through its paces and trying to get to the point where I can do a full review on my channel to as a conclusive video. Now, kind of wrapping up. This is what this device is. This is what the device is not. I also put some more content out there. But on my other machine, and you'll be happy to know, I have the Lenovo ThinkPad X1 Carbon still. And I decided to throw MX19 on that because I haven't played with MX in a while. And my goodness, I just love MX. I mean, it is just such a fantastic distro. The tools that he has in place are fabulous. The distro looks gorgeous for especially being XFCE and Debian and things. He just modernizes it, makes it very beautiful. But the thing that I like the most is the stuff that maybe most people wouldn't see. Like during the installer, for instance, a very clear section separate from where you want to install the hard drive section to say, where do you want to install Grub now? Whereas a lot of distros will hide that under advanced settings or maybe not even give you the option at all. And this is where you have the situation where all of our forums in Linux are littered with people saying, oh my gosh, I installed this other distro I wanted to try on my second hard drive and I overwrote everything and now Grub doesn't work because of not having a clear distinction, a clear area to say, this is where I want to put Grub on, or I don't want to put Grub in at all. I want to let another distro, and having things like that just make it such a great experience. So I love MX. So if you haven't checked it out lately, check out MX19. I've just really had a lot of enjoyment from it.
That sounds awesome. The only thing I'm upset about is I feel like you should not be able to play with your Pinebook until I get mine. I have paid my money. I have made my order. And do you see a Pinebook in my hands? No, all empty. So I don't have a Pinebook to play with.
That's the story I've ever heard, actually.
On the bright side, you might be in the batch to get the ANSI keyboard, and he has to deal with the ISO keyboard, so there could be that.
Yeah,
I did. Yeah, I got the US keyboard.
So that's why it's like we're waiting.
Perfect answer for you. Yours is a UK keyboard. Ship it over. Thank you.
Exactly, Brian. Just get on that. Zeb, tell me about your week.
It's been a good week, but a difficult week because we've actually been dealing on the Peppermint forums with the increase in activity after I appeared on Linux for Everyone. And it's surprising how many additional new users we've acquired in the last couple of weeks. And I know we're not supposed to look at it, but if you look at DistroWatch, we've now leapt ahead of Lubuntu, Sparky. So I think sort of like long term, 25, that's been about the highest we've been in the DistroWatch rankings. And I know they don't really count, but hey, it's a fun little metric to throw out there every now and again. So yeah, got lots of new users coming in. And what I love about it is lots of new users, lots of different hardware, lots of problems, because there's only like 15 or 20 of us testers when we come around to test the new ISO. So it's not until somebody comes along with his Okie Kokie 2000 laptop that he bought in 1942 that we realise that we didn't look at that type of problem. So yeah, it's been really good fun, if not busy.
The shameless self-promotion here, we need to get you added to linuxdelta.com and let the community review the distro and then compare it and contrast it to other distros. What is Peppermint OS good for? Is it good for service, IoT, desktop, all three? I'd like to know. I'll try and work on that.
Sounds good.
So it's interesting, Noah. I'm sitting here on linuxdelta.com, and I was just quickly clicking through all the distros just to see the average rating for every distro. And a couple here have been rated really high that I think obviously deserve it. And some, clearly it's kind of a mix. But the highest rated distro on here is Ubuntu Mate.
Yeah, it is. And so what's interesting about that is, and we designed the site based off of this, I don't actually see top rated reviews as a really good metric of being a good distro, right? And I'll explain why. If you have 5 people that rate, well, let's use real examples. On linuxdelta.com, Ubuntu Mate has 29 reviews, 4.9 stars. So 29 people decided that Ubuntu Mate is a really good distro, the 29 people that use it. However, if you go back up to the top and search by most reviews, what you'll find is OpenSUSE has a 4.65 star review and 78 reviews. Now, if I'm looking for a desktop distribution and I want to know what I'm going to have the best experience on, would you rather have the desktop distribution that 29 people use or 78 people use with a like a 0.3 of a star discrepancy or whatever? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And obviously, and this is not to say, I want to be very clear, this is not to say that Ubuntu Mate is an inferior distro to OpenSUSE, anything like that. This is obviously a representation of the limited amount of metrics that we have today. But as we continue to grow the site and we continue to move forward, this is the kind of thing that I look at and go, okay, I am interested in having people, real community members, people that actually use these things, come over and tell us what they're and what they're using. And then we have created algorithms that we can go and kind of condense that down and present it as information. So when I go to Amazon and I purchase something, I want to see where the most reviews are, not necessarily what the highest reviews are, because the most reviews tell me what the majority of people are using and are happy with. And of course, if you have a majority of reviews and it's 1 star, then we know that that's a bad distro. But when we get above that 4.5-ish stars, I would say that's a good distro. And so obviously you as the community, again, kind of shameless self-promotion here, you as the community have the opportunity to go and kind of voice your opinion on this. And I think that's a great way to do it.
Well, it's funny because I, didn't notice that sort feature is there, but you guys have been doing some work on this side. You've added some really cool features here. I love that. That's very helpful. So I was clicking through manually each one and just doing it. But this is more like you said of the way Amazon, say, would do reviews on things, where I know when I'm looking for a product, I sort first by how many stars it has. Does it have 4 or more stars? And then I look for how many reviews has actually been placed, because we know there's a lot of gaming with that type of stuff that happens. And so if you have something with 1,400 4 stars, that means a lot more than 10 4 stars.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Or even 10 5 stars, which turns out to be the friend of the developer or whatever, the friend of the person who built it. Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Very cool. I'm surprised Arch Linux isn't at the top, and there's probably something wrong with your algorithm there, but I'll help you with that.
Yeah, we're fine-tuning the thing. I actually told him, I said, if we can't figure it out, what we'll just do is write a last piece of code that says, if else, just raise Linux Delta or raise Arch to the top. So that's obviously what everybody wants to use.
Perfect, because Kubuntu doesn't even get in the top 10, Michael.
Kubuntu has my highest review, I'll have you know.
Yeah. I mean, Kubuntu hasn't been on there that long, so that's probably what it is.
Right, okay.
Right.
Michael, what is new in your world?
Many things. I've actually improved the OBS, got some new scenes, and also I've got the. I've actually found a new feature in, not really a feature, but I found a way to streamline my Kdenlive editing. And the best thing about doing computers, there's always some kind of technical issue that comes up randomly here and there. So all the time I saved in actually like editing with Kdenlive, I saved like 20-30 minutes or so with this particular fix, and all of that was thrown away when I was trying to do the actual publishing because there were some technical issues in here and there. So that's always just beautiful, where it just becomes like a an even slate, as it were. But I also got a monitor arm recently, and as is tradition for at least a little while, it's on top of the bookcase right here. So at some point I will be setting it up. But yeah, so I'm looking forward to all that stuff. But other than that, just making some content for the internet. So Noah, what you been up to this week?
Well, episode 2 of the School of Hard Knocks podcast is about to be released. I just finished the majority of the editing, got a couple of other touches to do. Now, this is kind of a cool episode because it's very interpersonal. We're talking about marriage and relationships, and I invited my wife to host the episode with me, and so we talk a little bit about, well, not a little bit, we spend a decent amount of time talking about our relationship. We got together when we were in high school, when we were sophomores in high school, and we got married before we were even really adults, and we've lived with each other and kind of grown up together. And so you look back, what is, I don't know, 16, 17 some years at 30 years old, I have spent more time alive married to my wife than I've spent single, and I certainly haven't had a single moment of my adult life where I haven't been married, and so that kind of gives me an interesting perspective. And so her and I chatted and kind of talked about some things and gave some advice and some thoughts and shared our what works for us, what doesn't work for us, and then we invited another couple who is in a relationship, and they have just started their relationship, and they have made very different relationship choices and gone about their relationship a very different way, and they're in a very different kind of relationship. And so we're going to try to show what those differences are, and kind of offer some advice. As far as the age when we got together, I think she was 15 years old and I was 16 when we got together, and so I'm 32 now, so that makes her 31. Yeah, we've been together for a long time.
Wow, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that'll be out tonight. Schoolofhardknocks.show. This episode of Destination Linux is brought to you by DigitalOcean. DigitalOcean offers the simplest, most developer-friendly cloud platform. It's optimized to make managing and scaling apps easy with their intuitive API, multiple storage options, integrated firewalls, load balancers, and much more. Now, you can get all of this, plus access to their world-class customer support for as low as $5 per month, and you can use their flexible pricing structure for as low as 0.7 cents per hour. As Ryan would say, that's darn near free. DigitalOcean also has 2,000 cloud-agnostic tutorials to help you stay up to date on the latest open source software, languages, frameworks, the whole kit and caboodle. You can get started on DigitalOcean for 1 month free with a $50 credit by going to do.co/DL. That's do.co/DL. And again, you can get started with DigitalOcean and that $50 credit by going to do.co/DL. And a huge thanks to DigitalOcean for continuing to sponsor Destination Linux.
Okay, so our community feedback this week, he writes, "Hey, I've listened to Destination Linux from around episode 67. Destination Linux is my favorite podcast style media. Keep it up. In the last episode, you talked about Firefox Punycode vulnerability. On a side note, both Bo and Dolphin were really good. By the way, I use Arch. I'm sure Ryan puts that in every week, whether they say that or not. While installing IceCat and reading what it changes from Firefox, I saw a value network.idn_show_punycode : true. After some quick reading, I tried it out and it seemed to fix a vulnerability issue. So after setting this network.idn_show_punycode to true in about:config, Ryan can finally keep on ordering MacBooks without worrying about fake Apple sites stealing his iMonies.
How rude.
It should even work with Windows, so Michael is also covered.
How dare you?
By the way, I read AUR changelogs and use i3 as one should. So I think he's had a go at everyone there.
Except Zeb and Noah.
Except me and you, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why.
I like this guy.
What?
Well, sorry. I mean, yeah, how dare you write in with such a carefully crafted, articulate, well-worded email?
Wow.
So what's interesting is I did try this tip out here and in Firefox, and it did work. It did stop the Punycode from changing to show apple.com in the test site that they have out there is actually apple.com. That's why we keep saying that. And it did work. So I think what it's doing here is turning off Punycode.
Yes.
And because of that, you know, like I think Bo was saying, you probably don't need those other languages. Not everybody's going to need them when there's translation services. If you had certain issues in reading certain sites, then you may need to turn that back on. But if you're more worried about that vulnerability, you could check the show notes. But this would be a good way of basically turning that off because it still hasn't been patched. So that's an interesting thing. And Michael, I don't know if you've tried this in Windows or not.
I don't use Windows, so no, I haven't. But
okay, shocking.
But it does. I did try it, and it did work for what I need. What it does for what it's supposed to do. But the issue is that there are some people who use different languages that use these different kind of characters that they really can't turn it off by default. They just need to have some kind of. They just need to make it where the Punycode does not change the domain, and that would be fine. Because if they had the Punycode being translated in everywhere else, it'd be fine. It's just the fact that it's translated in the domain is the problem. So if they just fix that, this wouldn't be an issue.
I'm just glad I can keep on ordering MacBooks with my iMoney.
Yes. Yes.
iMonies, plural. iMonies.
That's going to be a thing next from Apple. iMonies.
Probably. So Adrian writes in to say, "Hi guys, first up I'd like to say that I really enjoy the show. However, I'd like to hear your comments about Stratus D, which is supposed to be a replacement for ButterFS and ZFS made by Red Hat. Personally, I'm still on LVM plus XFS for servers and LVM plus Extended 4 for workstations. Rollbacks can be done using LVM snapshots as well as consistent backups with rsync. Regarding Fedora and Docker, I actually prefer Podman over Docker because with Podman, you interact directly with the image registry and containers, images, and the kernel, whereas the Docker, everything has to interact with a service that is running as root. Keep up the amazing work. Cheers, Adrian." And I agree with the Podman versus Docker debate. Like, Podman and Builda are a better structure. It was just more in the situation of like removing the Docker and like they're just changing the way they were doing Docker. Not necessarily saying that Docker is better. It's just that it's the most. It's like the brand that everybody knows. Like, everybody knows what Docker is, but not everybody knows what Podman is, and that sort of thing is what I was getting at. But I would say that it is better. Although I'm pretty sure that the service running as root has been addressed by Docker, but that might not. I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure they did address that. But as far as like Stratus D, I haven't tried Stratus D myself, but based on the way they describe it, it does make it possible to have the similar benefits of ZFS and ButterFS using Extended 4 instead. It looks interesting, but it's pretty new, and ZFS has had like tried and true testing for like 20 years or so, so I'm more interested in that becoming a thing. But there's a lot of options for it.
So a quick question for you technical guys. Is this something that your Linux noob can get involved in by just utilizing it, setting it, and forgetting it? Or do you have to sort of dig a bit deeper and understand what's going on?
No. In fact, one of the reasons that Red Hat made the choice to diverge from just standard Dockers and go towards a more modular system was specifically because there was more advancement and more features and more robustness and all of those kinds of things. And I can't remember who it was that we talked to. I did a bunch of interviews with people from Red Hat all right in a row back in like May of last year, and they're up on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/MindDripMedia. But if you listen to those, they talk specifically about. Actually, it was Chris Wright. It was who we talked to, and they talk specifically about how it was designed to take it from a certified system administrator, I have all the technical skill stuff like that, and start bringing it down to, hey, the system is set up, it's working, and there's just other people need to be able to manage it. Can anybody do that? And so that's the whole idea between being able to manage RHEL 8 from a web browser and things like Cockpit and so on and so forth, is that it makes it super, super easy and straightforward, and you don't have to be a command line genius and know a bunch of magical incantations to get your job done. No, it is absolutely designed for anybody to sit up and play with these things. And containers specifically were designed, even Docker itself was designed from the standpoint that you go to install this piece of application. Well, you better have this library and that version of PHP and have this thing over here and that thing over there. And that gets to be complicated and difficult for people to manage. And so with the container technology, you just literally drop the solution in and now it runs and now everybody's happy. So yeah, I would say anybody should consider playing with these things.
Nice.
Yeah, and there's also more work being done on various different structures for like the like ZFS being done for Ubuntu's doing that as currently as an experimental, but their goal is to have it in the LTS to be more user friendly, so that you could, no matter what your skill level is, to make it much easier.
I respectfully, let me see if I can find this. Let me see if I can find this and throw it in the show notes. I respectfully disagree to a certain extent. I would submit to you that that ZFS on Ubuntu today is perfectly user friendly. It's literally a single package and 3 commands to get it up and running. Now, does it have some fancy graphical user interface? Probably not. Is there any integration into the system disk utility? No. So if by those things you're saying they need to make it easier, or if Canonical is saying they need to make it easier, I guess I would kind of understand.
That's what I'm referring to.
But as far as like to Zeb's question, can anybody just do this? Absolutely. This is not a difficult thing to do. You can teach yourself to set up ZFS on Ubuntu in 45 seconds. Their tutorial is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean,
so when it comes to Stratus D though, and a replacement for ButterFS and ZFS, when you're dealing with the file system, for instance, ButterFS got a bad rap because of situations that happened where people lost their data. There is literally like zero, especially in the community when you're dealing with servers and people's work and jobs, of a give for a file system that loses files. Whether it happens once, and then it's gone away, and now ButterF has been perfect. People are holding that forever at this point, and it's going to be hard to convince anybody without massive marketing backing to take a look at it again. ZFS has a proven track record. So when I hear about the other options out there like Stratus D and others, to me, it will become something in the future, but it's going to have a long track record of being stable and offering some new features and advantages over something like ZFS, which, when you have so many big names that have used ZFS for so long and are pulling ZFS in, I think I would put my money on ZFS at this moment. Not to say others won't come in or still be used in other places, but I think ZFS is pretty much going to be your standard going forward.
I agree, and I don't think I think if you look at what is actually being integrated into systems, like if you look at where the push is, there's not, like, as much as we joke about ButterFS, how many companies are actively looking to center around ButterFS versus how many companies are desperate to get based on ZFS?
Mm-hmm. And just before we move on, we've also had a question from our patrons that does Podman run on anything other than Fedora / Red Hat?
Sure. It's open source software.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Thank you.
So finally, Rob writes in and he says, "Hey guys, thank you for all you do. I've been catching up a lot on the episodes and I love the different perspectives. I often have comments to toss back, and maybe I will join some of the chat channels. However, after finishing episode 141 specifically, the part on the Pine cluster I want to write in about. It was said on the show that this was just a publicity stunt. And while that is mostly true, it is also said by someone on the show that it was otherwise useless." That was Michael for sure. A number of companies...
Fake news.
It wasn't? Okay, all right. Well, if it's negative, it's usually you, but we'll continue on here with the email. Wow. It says, "A number of companies and universities have been spinning up sizable Raspberry Pi-based clusters, and they have a very practical use in that they're used for testing out code and processes on something very cost-effective for promoting that code, AI, ML modules, etc. Very expensive supercomputer clusters. Such testing and tuning their work so if they can use a 128-core Pi cluster to test and validate all the work and know it's written good, fix mistakes and inefficiencies and all that, they can go forward with super high-performance computers and supercomputers. Keep up all of the great work, and thanks again, Rob." So Rob is referring to Oracle here. There was an article that we covered back regarding Oracle, and they were basically setting up thousands of Raspberry Pi clusters together in order to make a publicity stunt, which he agrees it is. He's just stating that somebody said otherwise it was useless, and doing this type of thing actually isn't useless at all. It could have some usability in the real world there. Yeah. So thoughts?
No, I agree that it totally could be useful in certain cases, like maybe building stuff for ARM or building stuff for the Pi itself. Like that could be useful. And it also could be done in a testing structure of maybe if they want to do ARM on servers, they could use this as a testing bench for that. I think that it's not necessarily 100% useless. I think our entire point on the show was just to say that it's just a publicity stunt because they could have used things not the Pi, and the Pi gets them to get also being put on podcasts and stuff.
I think that's why we were so negative on it.
Yeah, also it's because it's Oracle, and because they didn't take the opportunity to make the amount to actually be like Pi based, like to have the actual amount of Pis be the number of Pi, and that is why I was disappointed with them the most.
That was a marketing failure for sure,
right?
Yeah,
exactly. So that's why we were negative about it.
But that's a good point. Bo and other people are setting up Raspberry Pi clusters. You even see them at Southeast Linux Fest. The clusters of Pi set up, not for supercomputer applications, but to handle.
No, but we do all the registration on them.
Yeah, all the registration and things are done through these clusters. So clustering is very useful, and you see it out in the real world, and it does take a very inexpensive component and make it more powerful. So definitely agree with you there, Rob, and thanks for clarifying that with that story there. And anytime you guys have disagreements or thoughts on the show, you can, of course, head to our Discourse forums out there where all the shows get posted and you can talk about them there. You could, of course, talk to us in the Telegram group or anything else as well. But I really appreciate you sending this email here.
So this goes to show why we love hearing from our worldwide community. We have many ways for your voice to be heard. You can send us a short email or a video that may get you incorporated into the show. So no matter how strange or new or newbie you think the question might be, send it in, and you never know, we may end up having a discussion about it.
So up first in the news this week, we have some really interesting stuff, though this is going to be one of those buzzword bingo type of articles.
Fun. Let me get my bingo board out.
Right. So Mozilla, Intel, Fastly, and Red Hat are the founding members of a new alliance called the Bytecode Alliance. And this is an interesting thing because their idea is to create an organization to, sort of push the WebAssembly platform into like a bigger range. So like you could have more industries focusing on using WebAssembly and all sorts of different things. So that's the goal of the partnership, is to kind of like reinvigorate the initiative built around WebAssembly and kind of push it forward more so. So a lot of people might not know what WebAssembly first is, so let's go ahead and just discuss that. So WebAssembly is essentially a replacement for JavaScript. The idea is to be able to increase performance and efficiency over JavaScript and allow developers to run code. And it's more like they don't have to run, they don't have to trust the code in order to run the code. So it's more like a safety thing as well. But the main thing is that it allows you to run C and C++ code inside of a web engine. So you don't actually have to build specifically for JavaScript. You could build for a regular native application and then run it through WebAssembly. So that's actually pretty interesting. And there's been a lot of different testing environments showing off how WebAssembly can be more efficient and be more powerful and all kinds of stuff. So it's really, really cool that they're doing this. Though what exactly they're doing for the Alliance itself, it's mostly buzzwords, so you kind of have to dig through to find all the different pieces and stuff. So, but anyway, so now that you see that they have like this, we got a better understanding of what WebAssembly is. They also have like an interesting history with the consortium in like 2015. It was kind of doing something similar, but didn't really fully get everything what they wanted. So that consortium was Google, Microsoft, Mozilla, and WebKit. But they haven't produced much from since that time, obviously, and it's an interesting thing because WebAssembly is a really powerful thing, and like there's so many examples of WebAssembly being done. Like AutoCAD has their own web version of their AutoCAD software running through WebAssembly, and there's also like game engines being demoed through WebAssembly. It's a really interesting piece of software and technology, but exactly what this alliance really is going to do, we don't know about that yet. But
yeah, I mean, this is another example of terrible marketing, I think, in Linux and open source world, because they create these are some big companies, right? You've got Mozilla, you have Intel, you have Red Hat, you have Fastly in here, which are all in their own right pretty powerful entities. And then they have a website they create, but the website really doesn't explain much of, okay, what are you going to do with this? What does this mean to the average user? It took me a ton of digging to finally figure out what they were attempting to explain here in their notes. And maybe, perhaps, that's why not having a clear mission statement, your consortium in 2015 failed, because you don't have a clear mission statement of what you want to do with it. So I would really encourage them, because as I understand it, some people have said that this is going to be a competition in a way to what Microsoft is pushing, what they call Blazor, which does the C code directly into the browser using .NET on WebAssembly, and of course is supposed to be a JavaScript replacement as well, and it's open source there. So they're trying to push that technology forward. It looks like, Mozilla and everybody is probably afraid of another thing on the web that Microsoft basically would control in essence. So they're trying to do their own thing, but there's only one example anybody's been able to find of this code in action, and that's a program from Google Labs called Squoosh. Now, I played with Squoosh, and I was blown away by it, about how powerful this little tool is for what it does. Now, this is a basic image compression tool where you take very large images that you can load and it compresses them within your browser. This is something that typically in a web, depending on, again, the coder and things, could take a lot of processing. You would expect a big loading bar to come up, loading your image, recompressing the image, and then you wait for a couple minutes on the web while it spins. And that would be the experience you'd be used to on a tool on the web. But this thing was so fast, it was like running a native app, which is essentially what this is trying to do. This WebAssembly code is give you that native-like speed and experience on the web. Michael, you're far more, you utilize this type of technology far more than I do in your job. What did you think of Squoosh?
Well, Squoosh specifically was impressive because of how much it can compress. It did it really quickly. That's one of the things is like WebAssembly makes it really quick because it's using basically native code. It's not native code, and it's not as efficient as native code, but it is impressively efficient for being a web-based application essentially. And the Squoosh is impressive because it allowed me to take 93% of the file size off of the file and still have the quality that I wanted to keep. It was like 80% the quality of the image, but 93% smaller file size. So it goes from like 2.8 megabytes to 203 kilobytes. And it did it within seconds. So that is a incredibly useful thing for people who do websites, especially if you want to push out, a lot of files, or you do like a photo gallery or something. You can display the images on it. You have the big giant files that you're for your storage and actually have the full size of the image. But then when you put it on the web, you don't need to have those ridiculously huge images for that purpose. So you could have those being displayed in a much smaller thing. So that's a really cool implementation of the WebAssembly, like runtimes and stuff. There are quite a few of these runtime projects that are basically using the runtimes, but essentially this alliance is just taking different runtimes for different types of devices and all these other things, these frameworks, and then like kind of putting them together to create like this alliance or consortium of tools to be able to build stuff on top of it in the future. So that's really what its purpose is.
So forgive me if the cynic in me rises to the top, but is this another, or is this going to be another example of, because let's face it, there's some pretty big companies having a go at this back in 2015, and it's not ready yet. So is this going to be another, we need to replace Xorg, so we're going to have Wayland? Is this going to be, we need to replace Java, so we're going to have this WebAssembly, but it never arrives?
No, not necessarily, because like WebAssembly already exists and the technology behind it is already very impressive. And when the terms of like 2015, it wasn't ready to do the thing that they wanted to do. Right. But now we're at a position where we can essentially do, the best example is the Citadel game demo from the Unreal Engine for the Epic Games. When they had the Unreal Engine, they created this Citadel demo, and the Mozilla team were able to use WebAssembly to render out and actually run the Citadel demo inside of the Firefox browser using WebAssembly.
Oh, wow, okay.
And it wasn't as good as core code. It wasn't as efficient. It didn't have as many frames. But the fact that it could do that on a game level was ridiculously impressive. When you take out that and put it into other particular like industries and other things, like obviously the game engines and game demos are going to be the most taxing on a system or taxing on a technology, because they're trying to do as much as they possibly can to get it the best quality out and the best performance out. And the fact that it was even possible to do it, like this was like a couple years ago that Mozilla was able to do this. So we're at a position now where having that applied to applications like AutoCAD and that kind of thing is ridiculously cool.
This is a push to take all of these very powerful tools, and now you have that web application, much like, say, Adobe and others have tried to do. One of the reasons they like this technology is for pirating, right? It's much more difficult to pirate a web application than it is application you would install on your machine. But this also starts to become a problem in an interesting way if everybody starts moving to these web-based tools for everything in the digital divide scenario, right? Not everybody has high-speed access in their homes. So many people, millions of people don't have internet access at all. So, it's an interesting thing because you don't want technology to stop, but at the same time, are we ready yet to really have a bunch of tools created out there that run only on the web? Is there a lot more time in between before we see this technology really become something?
Yeah, it's not going to be like game changing to everything really quickly or anything, but it has potential to be very powerful because, yes, there are pros and cons. One of the pros would be that no matter what system you had, the application will be able to run because it's just using your browser. So as long as the back-end WebAssembly frameworks and stuff are compatible with whatever your system is, or whatever it compiles on. And what's really cool is that if you look at the listing of all the frameworks and runtimes that they are putting up part of the Alliance, the first operating system they mention is Linux. So on every single one of them. So that's very nice.
And if you look at the direction we're going as a society, right? For a long time, we fought over use my program, not yours, right? Use this software suite, not that software suite. And what we've gone to is instead of trying to control or trying to work on the marketing aspect and try and get people to choose your software based on the merits, instead what we have gone to is try to control the protocols and the standards in which applications are based on, and then your application becomes, quote unquote, the Kleenex of the tissue world, right? And that's, to me, that's really terrifying because the companies that are going to be most successful at that are the companies that we want the least influence from: Microsoft, Google, Apple, so on and so forth.
Yeah, you're not wrong there. So when we were talking about this, even though it's not directly related to WebAssembly, but it's a web technology, like for instance, on the Pinebook Pro, one of the first things that you have to do if you want to watch Netflix and things is run this special patching software script that somebody ran that basically downloads Google Chrome, pulls the Widevine and Pepper stuff out of it, and then infuses that into your Chromium session that allows you then to actually play these services. My family wanted to have Disney Plus on the TV. And so my son has a computer in his room, and I thought, well, I'll put Disney Plus on there on your computer, your Linux computer, which he runs Pop! OS, the latest version, and can't run Disney Plus. Now, you want to know why? Because they use apparently a DRM level 3, which is this restricted DRM level that even no Linux-based browser apparently has it built in to be able to run this DRM level 3 that they've put in there. Netflix and Amazon apparently run at DRM level 2. So they start putting these restrictions into the software. And when you say something like, well, it's browser-based so everybody can use it, that's not even the case today with this stuff, because they basically put their own standards in there that restrict certain operating systems from actually running this stuff. And you're right back to square one once again with software not being compatible, because we want it to only work on Chromebooks. We want it to only work on Chromecast. We want it to only work on Chrome. These type of things that happen. So when these big companies get powerful like this, and and maybe that's what Mozilla is attempting to do with this consortium, is to keep one of these companies like Microsoft from basically getting Blazor or something else to become the standard in which they will just infuse their restrictions on top of.
Yeah, that's
it would be nice for Mozilla to get their own back, because we know that Google puts so many little hidden bits of code in their browser that you don't get the same sort of experience on Mozilla. So to have these guys maybe get their own back, I think would be fantastic.
Yeah. It's also pretty interesting in the fact that there's the really cool thing about WebAssembly is that you can use whatever language you want, in theory. Like there is not a runtime or compiling for every single language, but they are working on making it so that you have, as long as your browser can run WebAssembly code or WebAssembly compiled programs, it can then, you could use whatever language you want to do it. So that's another really cool thing for developers. They don't have to learn a new thing in order to utilize it. However, there's in the live patron chat, Kabavik says that a really interesting point about how there could be a negative, just issue with this by having the code for the compiled applications running in WebAssembly being proprietary. Because technically, while the platform and frameworks are open, they don't. You're compiling these applications to run in WebAssembly to make it more efficient. And by doing so, you really can't look at the code. And one of the values of the web and JavaScript is that it itself is open automatically. So that is an interesting point. And I definitely don't like the idea that we'd be going into a proprietary web, or even more so that we already are. But there are so many benefits to it as well. It's like a catch-22. Either way, there's going to be a negative and pros and cons. But I think the overall having an alliance with these companies is a good example because they're all very interested in open source and keeping things as open as possible. That this is like the best possible approach I would want to have WebAssembly, because we definitely want to have WebAssembly because of how powerful it is and how much it can, improve the web and make it, like, even if you have applications that are loaded from a server, but then once they're loaded, they can be used locally on your machine, their WebAssembly can do that. So there's a lot of potential.
I just want to know how they're keeping this thing sandboxed, because they basically, in a lot of their marketing spin, have said, hey, developers can now run untrusted code. And that's a very bold statement to throw out there to everyone. That, hey, now you can go run untrusted code. By the way, when we were talking about DRM, I found this interesting, and I tweeted this out to Disney with their super DRM level, that they made the news also for being the most pirated shows out there. So all that DRM protection accomplished nothing.
Zero.
No,
It's
it does.
zero.
I disagree. It accomplishes something major. Here's what it accomplishes. It accomplishes people like you and me going, I'm willing to pay for Disney. I want to pay for Disney. I'm going to watch it on this computer. Oh, I can't. Okay, now what do I do? I guess I pirate it.
There you go.
I guess I'll just watch it that way since I can't watch it legally. The most successful curbing of piracy ever in the history of time, in my opinion, is Amazon Music. Amazon made it so easy, so simple, and so cheap to just go to Amazon and spend 99 cents to buy the song you want. You know it's of good quality. You know it's the proper rip. You know it's the actual thing. There's no weird encoding things. There's no weird ID3 tags. There's no misspelling. All of that stuff is right. And then they release it, and anybody can just do it. There's no DRM. You can just download it. You play it on whatever player you want. You give copies to your friends if you want. It just doesn't matter. Overnight, it seems, I don't hear anybody pirating music anymore. They just go to Amazon and buy it. Why? Because it's simple, it's easy, and it doesn't restrict people. And so if you want to ensure people pirate your content, then wrap it up in as much DRM as possible, make it as difficult and challenging for people to do it as humanly possible. And you'll make sure that you never, alleviate the DRM thing.
So Povok says, in the same way JavaScript engine is sandbox, it does give the ability to execute anything lower than the browser, and you still don't have direct access to the file system. So in that same case, though, people always find ways to exploit this stuff. And so, like I said, I still find it, and I don't understand, admittedly, all the technology behind it, very bold to go out there and say, hey, you can go run whatever code you want and untrusted whatnot on your main machines, and it's going to be fine with this, because I'm certain, without a doubt, somebody will find some vulnerability somewhere within this to execute.
Moving on to software news, Kdenlive 19.08.3 has been released. So Kdenlive is out with a new point release that addresses some bugs in the popular open source video editor. So we're going to cover some of the fixes that are included here. And this is where I'll probably hand over to Michael, because he's got the most experience. But is this going to be one that I've been hearing a lot of chatter in a lot of the Telegram groups that I'm in, that Kdenlive has been blowing up on a lot of people, and it just keeps crashing, and they've been spending hours trying to do all of their work, and then all of a sudden, poof, and they're now trying to find other things. Is this going to be a little savior, or is this more like a paper cut release?
It's mostly. I don't even think I haven't had any experience of it blowing up. But like if an application crashes, if your application crashes, one of the things that's great about Kdenlive is that it has restoring. So if your system, as long as your system doesn't crash, but if Kdenlive crashes and you reopen Kdenlive, it'll ask you, do you want to restore the one you were working on? And it will, because it saves the history automatically for you because of that restore feature. So I don't even think that's really that big of an issue, because they have those solutions. However, if you just consistently save your document, it doesn't really matter if it does crash. But in terms of like most of this stuff is to improve its like compiling performance, to fix some different composition stuff that's broken, fixing things that are issues on like track layout, and just fixing overall bug fixes and paper cut stuff, because this is basically a minor update, but Kdenlive is constantly doing these types of things. But that's one of the reasons I wanted to give attention to Kdenlive, is because they have, like, they do the KDE release every, like, along with the rest of the stack every 6 months or so. But they also keep up to date with doing bug fixes and pushing out different things. And I talked to, just recently, like 3-4 days ago, I talked to the developers for Kdenlive about a particular feature that I wish they had. And then they told me how like they asked me to like submit like a bug report or issue, whatever, and then they start working on it. And I don't think it's available in this particular release. I don't think so, because I'm pretty sure it was right after that it came out. But they have like dailies and betas that they come out and they push versions and new features and stuff really quickly within a few days or weeks when I request them to do something. And in the meantime of the bug not being there, they actually showed me how I could do it by editing the XML code, which is not necessarily ideal for everybody. But the fact that they were like, hey, we know what you want to do, here's the way to do it, you don't have to wait for us to put it in the application. Like, that's a really awesome thing that they're doing, and they're very attentive to that. So it's just, I just wanted to give attention to that, because Kdenlive is a fantastic open source video editor.
Zep's not wrong here, though, from the aspect that I've noticed a lot of people in some of the circles that I run in anyways on Twitter and other things beating up on Kdenlive in the last few weeks. And it's interesting, because when I started with Linux, I remember finding Kdenlive and going, okay, finally I can do my videos. But people were like, oh, good luck, it's going to crash on you constantly. And they weren't wrong, but it was, you could deal with it. But it was a frustration. But then Kdenlive kind of did some pushes, and it seemed that it's been cleaned up for a long time now. You could pretty much run Kdenlive, and I would rarely ever have a situation where I had to even use the restore feature. But to your point, Michael, if it did crash, I could just do the restore feature, and I was back up with my files where my edits left off, and I was good to go. And by the way, this happens in nearly every video editor out there as well.
Right.
So let's not pretend that the other ones
the crashing happens in every video editor. Having restore features, not necessarily every editor has that.
Yeah, so I mean, they've done some, but there is something going on out there with Kdenlive that has caused people to come back on this train, and maybe it's just the resurgence of people talking about Kdenlive or something else. But what made me frustrated was seeing so many people recommending DaVinci again, because that's one that I've truly had so many problems with. Some of the worst software. Now, you can, if you stick with a very specific distro, you might be able to run it and have fun. I've heard people say I run it and I've never have an issue. But my experience with DaVinci has been nothing short of complete misery, and supporting it when people talk about it is complete misery, because its installation is completely inconsistent, doesn't install on most people's machines. And literally, if you go on YouTube and talk about and look at videos for why Linux isn't ready to take on the desktop, nearly every single one of them is DaVinci Resolve, that they end up talking about these new people trying to come to Linux saying, how can you guys say that it's ready for the desktop when you can't, I'm trying to use this editing suite. Whereas something like Lightworks, if you want that powerful proprietary, works everywhere. I don't have any issues with it. Very expensive tool, of course, so it's not for everybody. But again, if you want to go professional, Lightworks. If you're just amateur or doing YouTube and things, Kdenlive are perfect options for you.
Well, the problem is that Resolve has a free version, and that's why they try Resolve. But like the worst thing is that Resolve says that they have Linux support, but they have like CentOS Red Hat support, and that's pretty much it. But they promote it as Linux support, and that's like, well, most people are not going to be using Red Hat or CentOS as their distribution for the desktop. That's just ridiculous. So it's really weird that they promote it the way, and it's mostly DaVinci Resolve's fault for not using something like a Snap or Flatpak or AppImage to push it out, and they use their own special binary SH file, like it's a script.
I've sent them dozens of emails and feedback to DaVinci developers to say, please, you're literally hurting the community with your software. Yeah. Please look at a universal package or something to make your installer, and they never respond.
Yeah, I would kind of rather it not be on the platform rather than being so buggy on the platform that it makes people just mock.
It seems to be the first one people know about, so yeah. So Noah has had a little bit of an emergency. Something crashed. I think it was one of his Windows servers that he supports out there or something along those lines. But thankfully, we pulled in Dark One literally last second. And when I mean last second, I mean, oh my gosh, I'm going through Telegram looking for someone who's done the show before that can jump in last second, understands the flow, could do that. And Dark One was kind enough to join us here so that we have a fourth person, a fourth perspective on here. Dark One, dude, thank you so much for joining us last second.
Not a problem. I always enjoy being on the show, guys.
Awesome.
Wonderful. Good man.
Next up in the news, we have something interesting that speaks to my heart. As many of you know, I've been in telecom for a long time. I have seen from the the back door of what has gone on in the telecom world, and it's not very pretty. And a lot of this information that I have heard of or knew was going on about privacy and security on phone and mobile devices is finally coming out into the public eye. And it seems like every single week there is more information about things happening, pieces of your phone that's tracking you, grabbing data on you, apps that are taking data, that are pulling more information than their terms and conditions said they were. All of these things are finally coming to light to individuals, and privacy is becoming a big deal. Now, we've talked a lot about the Pine phone that's coming out, and we've also talked about the Librem 5 phone that is coming out. But there's another one that has popped onto the radar known as Volla. Now, this is competition for this privacy-friendly open source device, and I'm so happy that multiple companies are starting to enter into this arena because we need this desperately for our phones. Most of us have more private information by a lot on our phone than we have anywhere else. Probably anywhere else, period. Your phone has more information on it than any other device. So where would you want privacy more than your phone itself? And we have accepted for far too long the crappy options that are out there. So Valla is a company founded by Dr. Jorg Warzer, an experienced entrepreneur with 20 years of experience in machine learning, development, and AI. So he has a lot of achievements behind him. And this Volla phone is going to come with Nemo Mobile by default. So kind of their own take on a mobile OS that's based on the Android open source project specifically. The other thing that made me interested in this, because a lot of people can talk about, oh yeah, I'm creating a privacy-based device. I mean, we've all seen Apple's advertisement out there, right? That they're the privacy company. So just because you say it doesn't make it so. So obviously more research and information as this company unfolds and we get to learn more about what they're doing, we're going to wait there with bated breath to hope that that they're going to deliver exactly what they're saying. But they said they are also going to support Ubuntu Touch on this device by default. Nice. And that makes me pretty happy to hear because Ubuntu Touch is probably one of the more complete mobile OSs out there as an option for people to use. We've all done videos. I know Michael's used it. I've used it. Zeb, you've used one. I don't know, Dark One, have you used the Ubuntu Touch device yet?
A little bit, not a whole lot. Mostly on an older 1+1.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's good. You can see the makings of something really special there if they continue to get the support and things that they need. And they do that with a very small development team. But as all this hardware starts coming out to support Ubuntu Touch, we can expect that likely the support with this OS would increase as well. So this device is in the prototype stage. So again, we don't know everything about it, but it is boasting a cost of around €360, so quite a bit more expensive than the Pine phone, but less than the Librem 5, I believe. It has modest hardware like a 6.3-inch screen, 8-core processor, dual cameras, wireless charging. So these are a lot of conveniences that you'll find in your modern phones that this is going to include a 5,000 milliamp battery, a fingerprint and Face ID scanner, along with USB-C, 4G LTE, voice over LTE, and voice over Wi-Fi capabilities built into the phone. So what's interesting to me about this is it has a lot of the modern technologies that we expect in a device that they're building in here for a very reasonable price for phones, especially at the point where what is the new Samsung, like $1,900 for their flip phone or some stupid thing?
But look how crazy the industry has gone when we think of modest hardware as a 6.3-inch screen. I mean, if you go back 5 or 6 years, that would be classed as humongous, almost a phablet. But now it's modest hardware. I think this looks absolutely great.
Yeah. So on default, Volla OS will also have anonymous app store with no Google Apps or Play integration and a pre-configured VPN, which is through hide.me, which I had not heard of before.
Same.
But there are 10 billion different VPNs out there, so I'm not surprised I haven't heard of it. But it's interesting that they're looking at adding a pre-configured VPN into the device, and that also they're going to allow you to get Android apps via an anonymous app store without having to have the Google Play integration. At least that's what they're claiming, or the Google Play integration into your device. So this starts to, if this is the case, and they can do this in a sandboxed manner, potentially, This would help fill that gap in between. One of the big problems with people switching to a device like this, a privacy-centric device, is there's no apps. You're not going to have your banking apps that you may need, your credit card apps, your apps for your social site, all that stuff. It's difficult in these OSs that are being built when you have the foundations of Google and Apple have millions of apps over decades of work being done on them to get somebody to create their app for your device. But if you can sideload those apps, and again, in a manner in which you're not using the Google integration, that's a pretty interesting option that they have there.
I think it's gonna be very limited though of like what kind of apps they can have, because any app that requires this Play services will probably not work.
Yeah. So I wonder what Google's technique will be to, as more companies kind of try to do this side loading thing, because I believe even Ubuntu Touch, there's a tool that you can use to side load some Android apps, right?
It's experimental, but yeah, it's called Anbox, so you can do it.
Yeah, Anbox. So, I mean, I think Google probably will react and make it nearly impossible at some point for people to even do this. But at the time being, it may provide an interim solution there. They promise not to collect data or track or do any statistical grabbing at all. Of course, as long as they remain open source and we can validate that, then that could be a trusted statement. They're raising funds for this device on Kickstarter. They have a very modest goal of $385,000. They've raised $11,000 at the time that I looked at it. It's probably more at this point, but they're going to have a lot of features on this device. Your basic phone features, contacts, call people, compose emails, short messages, web search, searching on your device, reminders, calendar events, plan your routes, create notes, all of the basic things covered in this device. So I'm interested. I'm watching suspicious because I've never heard of any of these people or what they've done in the past. But I'm just very excited that we have people interested in developing hardware like this.
Do we know how long the Kickstarter's been going for?
They have like 20-something days left.
Oh, okay. Because that's a little bit, it must be a bit depressing for them where they wanted to raise like over 300,000 and they've only got 11.
Well, it's interesting because...
People don't know about it, or?
Well, so there's a couple problems with this Kickstarter and with the phone in general. I'm really interested in it because like they have like a lot of the stuff they're displaying is really cool ideas. Like they have like this custom launch panel thing that you can do everything from one quick access point, and you can create. You could search for contacts. You can go to the web. You can do all kinds of stuff from this one interface, which is really interesting as a concept. But there's a few problems with the Volla phone. Kickstarter, for example, the phone is not available in the U.S. and they don't have. They saying they're working on the FTC or FCC compliance to get it to be available in the U.S. But it was easier to do the EU first, which has been shown that there's a lot of companies that have said that getting certified in EU is a lot easier than the U.S. So that's why they don't have it yet. But I think that's one of the things that hurt their Kickstarter campaign is because a significant portion of the economy of people interested in the smartphones market aren't available to get it. So it just kind of takes their potential out a lot. But that's like the biggest issue that they have. There's a lot of cool concepts, and they did say that even if they don't meet their Kickstarter campaign, that they're going to be continuing to work on the Volla phone. So that's really good to know. But I think that's the issue is like when I saw this, I was like, oh, this is really cool. I can't like all the specs look cool, like they're really powerful, like the price is super reasonable, and I can't have it. So
yeah, it looks like they're coming up against red tape because they're waiting for FCC certification or something.
Right, but I think the problem is that if they should have waited until they got everything ready to go, because at this point it seems like they're promoting a thing that's going to be really awesome, but you can't, like certain parts of the world can't have it. Like I'm not sure if Canada is included in this situation right now or not, or if it's just the US. That's a significant amount of people that are not available to get the phone, and a lot of the promotion of it would be related to that market as well. So yeah, that could be why they're not getting.
One of the FAQ is, why is it only available in Europe? And it's obviously got to do with this various certification that you need by standards around the world. So, yeah.
I just think that's why they're not getting as much attention and as much backing is because of that situation. Not necessarily saying that the
always-
phone is bad for it. Like, the phone looks really awesome, and I do really want to get it.
But I'm also really interested in situations like this because obviously, if they can't get anywhere near their $385,000 goal, what happens to the people who've already donated? Do they get their money back, or has it already been spent in what you're doing?
Well, I think the way that I don't think that Kickstarter offers the option to take the money without fully completing the campaign. So I'm pretty sure everybody gets their money back if they don't meet the campaign.
Right, gotcha.
But that could be changed by Kickstarter, but I'm pretty sure that's how they structure it.
Quite a big risk then on behalf of this particular organisation, hoping to get $400,000, but just out of Europe.
It's interesting because it's a lot of money to risk for people as well. To drop $400 on something where you, at least in my case, never heard of the company. The individual sounds like they've accomplished a lot in their life, but I've never heard of them either, and they don't have a track record of any hardware that I can see prior to this to make me go, okay, well, they're definitely going to see this to fruition. And unfortunately, they've come into a Kickstarter campaign, a period of time where people are very burnt out on the fact that a lot of people start these and then never finish them.
Right.
And so all of that coupled together is really a difficult thing to sell. Now, they did put some real images of prototypes of what the device could look like and tried to show that it's really there. But again, we've seen that in the past, and we've seen failures happen. So I hope they do.
Well, in this case, they actually do, because they're basing it on Android, because Nemo is an Android thing. It's because they're basing it on Android. It makes it a lot easier for them to create a phone rather than the full Linux thing that the Pine and the Librem are doing. So that does make it more sense that they could have a phone that's more easily built. And their prototypes, unlike other campaigns where they're just showing photos, they actually do have working videos, like just demonstrating how it works and everything. So it does exist, but they're I think that I agree with the whole not knowing who this company is, not knowing who's behind it, has another issue of them trying to get the money this way. And also the timing of it is a little awkward too, because people, as you said, people are burnt out on like Kickstarters in general, but like phone-based Kickstarters have been doing. There's like, now we have the Librem is the only one that's pretty much ever like has the potential of being existing, whereas the other phone-based things didn't even become a thing. Like maybe like the Fairphone or something. I'm not sure if that was a Kickstarter or not, but like there's so many examples of technology campaigns and Kickstarter, Indiegogo and stuff that got people excited and then just fizzled out or never even existed.
And $400 is a lot to throw up there in a wish and a dream. So it'll be interesting to see where this goes. I'm just excited that more people are starting to see that, hey, there's a market here. There's enough of a market that they're trying to launch companies around it. And whether this one becomes successful or not, I think that certainly people are starting to pay attention to their privacy in such a way that other people are looking to form companies to take advantage of that in a good way, hopefully, of getting people hardware and software that they can trust.
Right.
And even if it isn't successful, and as I say, we will hope it is, it may show other organizations the level at which they need to start, because just starting in Europe obviously isn't working. You've got to go the whole globe,
right,
and try and get all of your eggs ready, and then say, right, now we're ready to move out. Let's see if we can get some financing behind this. But all the best.
Yep. Up next in the show is a topic that Zeb cannot wait to talk about because he loves these kinds of things, and that is the Google project Nightingale. And this is a new thing from Google with a secret project called Nightingale, and this is a project to gather millions of Americans' health data, like doctor diagnosis, hospitalization records, lab results, and other health history things. So with this amount, they basically have your entire medical history at their disposal, and they're in their database, so they can probably sell that for advertising purposes. And it is reported that 150 Google employees have access to this information currently, and tens of millions of records have already been secured by a company called Ascension. Okay, that sounds such like a sci-fi villain,
doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Super, like very much like that's as soon as I saw it. Yeah.
Skynet have merged.
Exactly. So they are stating the move is completely compliant with HIPAA. Okay, sure. And other regulations, and the data will only be used for narrow purposes. So, like, HIPAA implies that this is for hospitals to have the data that they could share between other hospitals and other doctors and stuff like that. Google, not a hospital. How is this compliant? So anyway, this is all being done without any permission from the patients or the doctors. So that is just completely egregious.
You don't get a choice.
Yeah.
I just don't get how something like this can come to fruition. So first of all, how dare they use Florence Nightingale's name for such a nefarious product? Yeah, it's just wrong on so many levels. Surely there are laws to state, I mean, I'm pretty sure there's laws in the UK that only doctors and hospitals can have access to your patient data. Even if an insurance company that's going to be paying out on your health insurance, all they get, as far as I understand, is a nod from your doctor. Yes, he is suffering. Yes, he's had to pay out this. Please pay out on his insurance. Surely they can't be given access to every single medical record that you've got in that doctor's, because someone like me, I've been going to the doctors for 50, 59, 60 years. So how dare they think that they can use all of that information? So why aren't governments stopping this?
Well, there is an investigation that has kicked off on this, but I'm going to give you their reasoning behind this, Zeb, which is going to make you feel all warm inside. Number one, they promise they're not going to sell this to anybody else. Okay, so they promise. So that should set you calm right there to know that they're not going to sell it. And number two is their goal is to create an AI-powered software to help patients with their medical care. So basically, they're taking all of this information that they didn't ask if they could have from 100 million of people around the world, of the United States, and they're basically going to siphon through that data and allow AI to solve all of your medical problems out there and create new treatments and things that could help you. So that is how they're coming about it. They're saying, hey, we're never going to sell this and all this. But how many times, let's say all of that is true, how many times has a company had those data records stolen, information like that left out on databases that were unsecured, and things where nefarious purposes happened regardless of what their intent was? And this is supposed to be protected, but apparently there is a little clause in HIPAA that says that as long as it is used for something based on a patient's healthcare, improving their healthcare, that they can give these records out. But and
for me, therein lies the problem. This is not to help improve their healthcare. This, for me, is just another out that the insurance companies can give for not paying out for your healthcare. This is going to be, but when you was 5 years old and you fell over and scraped your knee, you never had an injection against rabies or something, so therefore your whole policy's void.
Yep.
Really? This is just a hideous example of collection of your data. And unfortunately for our generation, it's too late. They've got everything they could ever possibly want. But this makes me even more mad now to think that we have got to fight for our children and our grandchildren and our grandchildren's children to stop this nonsense happening. This is just horrific, really horrific.
I agree with you, Zeb. I think the fact that these guys, Ryan, you make the sarcastic response of like, they promised never to sell the data. Kind of like they said they'd never like targeted advertise kids with Chromebooks at school, right?
Right, exactly.
We can't take these companies at their words. The only way to take these companies at their words is if they're legislated into their word, and without any stupid little HIPAA clauses to get them out of it.
But Matt, their motto at Google is "Don't be." Oh wait, never mind. They got rid of the "Don't be evil." It's just totally evil as they want to.
Yeah. But another question I've got is, no disrespect to Ascension, they may be a very, very good company, but who are they? Does anybody know who they are? Does anybody know how secure their servers are?
Yeah, they're sci-fi villains. We already talked about
that. Are they going to be another sort of like Cambridge Analytics that Facebook said they had all the information, and that, we all know what went wrong with that particular episode. So I just don't get how politicians can allow this sort of nonsense to go on.
No, it's shocking, and everybody should be enraged about this and writing their politicians about this and stop using Google products because of this type of stuff here.
Yeah.
It continues to go on because honestly, that's the only message that they're going to get. Now, other companies like Amazon, Apple, and big tech have been all looking to get into this very lucrative business of healthcare, right? We know that there's just billions and billions of dollars just pouring out from being able to get into the healthcare system in some form or fashion. But this is the only one I've seen to date in which they're taking their entire medical history of people and putting it into massive databases and then giving access to their employees to go through that. And I don't care what nonsense they come up with of, oh, we anonymized it at some point so they can't see who it is and all of that. We know where this goes. This is exactly what I said before, that every time your privacy is taken away, it's going to be because of some way that they're going to help you or some way to keep you secure. And it always starts out with a positive thing. Like, who doesn't want to keep children safe on the internet? Okay, have some of my privacy. Who doesn't want to stop terrorists? Here, have some more of my privacy. And then they take that and they go to the next level with it. Because once Google gets away with it, maybe it won't be Google. It's the next company that comes in that says, well, they got away with that. So what if we did this?
But this is the one example of they can't anonymize the data to protect you, because the whole point of this thing is to help you. So it's going to be your data that gets through to the end user who wants it, because, of course, they're going to make sure that you get the right type of drugs at the right level at the cheapest possible price.
Yeah.
Like that's going to ever happen.
This is for health companies to deal with. And you know, I believe it was Red Hat that open sourced some of their AI tech that could be used in the healthcare industry. But notice Red Hat didn't say, hey, we're going to collect a bunch of those records ourselves and run it through AI. They open sourced the code. So those in the healthcare industry that already have access and the rights to that information could implement it within their systems and use it. This is bad on every front.
Yeah. Well, Ryan, and to your point, the Apple isn't much farther behind on this, though. What's the biggest selling point of the Apple Watch?
Well, but that is interesting because you're not wrong, but at the same time, there's been no information that I've seen of them gathering mass amounts of millions of records of people's entire medical history. They actually are working with the Heart Association and other major labs and research centers that are sending them data to say, look for these type of rhythmic issues in your heart with your watch to let people know they're about to have a heart attack or something. And for the most part, if you look into what Apple actually is grabbing and sending back to home base, most of that, a lot of their data elements like location data and things stay locally on your device. They're not sent back to the home base of Apple. So I would actually trust Apple far more.
No. I totally this bad all around. I'm just saying what we're slowly doing though is our health data is becoming the new product.
Yeah,
that's my point. It doesn't matter if it's Apple, Google, Amazon, Microsoft.
Right.
Take it back. That is the new honeypot of money as opposed to targeted advertising.
Yep. Absolutely.
Google, if you're listening, please send an extra dose of blood pressure pills to my doctor, because I'm going to need them after this.
They already knew that, and they've sent them ahead of time.
So let's move on now to a subject which is a better topic, but can also be just as frustrating. If Linux feels slower, that's because it is. Now, our friend over at Phoronix has been doing a lot of benchmarks, and with all the advancements going into the kernel, certainly things are getting faster, you might think. Well, according to Phoronix, who ran some benchmarks from the kernels ranging from 4.16 to the current 5.4, that's not the case at all. At least not. Oh, here we go, Ryan. At least not if you are running an Intel CPU.
Yeah.
So Phoronix ran its suite of tests from all of the kernels and found 4.16 took first place 35% of the time. Exactly why these things are getting slower isn't fully known yet. But the fact that this is happening, and lots of speculation since these tests were run on Intel, was that this has to do with all the mitigations that are building up and building up. Oh, wait a minute. There's more. Zombieland has reared its ugly head, and we've got even further mitigation. So before I hand it over to you guys, I will add the caveat. Who has been attacked by these mitigations? I guarantee you could, if you're running a home computer and you turn off this mitigation protection, you'll be fine. It's people running servers and who have sensitive data that need to protect themselves. Because I have not heard of a single person being attacked.
Whether you hear it or not doesn't mean that you should remove it. Like, there's certain pieces of the mitigations. Like, for example, if you remove Spectre mitigation, you could be drive-by JavaScript infected on a website. So removing certain mitigations would be a bad idea. It depends on what exactly you need. I think the best approach to it would be to remove your Intel chip and go to an AMD chip, and you cut your so.
Which Deb doesn't have that problem because he's on the Threadripper.
I'm on the Threadripper, yeah, but it's still the principle of I've yet to hear of somebody who has been attacked.
Well, the whole point of these mitigations is because they're already available. As soon as they come up with something, the mitigations are being built for that purpose. So you like if someone is attacked by these things, they are catastrophic attacks. So if they were to just wait until somebody was affected by it, it'd be a very bad being affected.
I'm
by
not
this.
saying don't protect people, but I'm just saying not everybody needs to be protected, I don't think. But then that's maybe just my unprofessional, noob, non-technical opinion.
Well,
But
it depends on the attack, because some of these do require somebody to have physical access to your machine. They require a lot of work in there. But again, think about your medical records sitting out there now in Google Shop, and they decide not to put these mitigations in because of speed issues. And now somebody has executed something that, by the way, even if they encrypt the data, some of these attacks are able to work around encryption to still get to the data, because apparently it's a matter of getting the keys within the lower levels of memory that they can still steal out of your system.
And that's why I said it was important for the home user. If you're a business, you better be running every single piece of security you can get hold of. Yeah.
But I do think it's interesting. Now, to be fair, Phoronix is going to run these tests on AMD for the kernels. They didn't at this point to see if this same problem is happening. So we don't know if this is a physical CPU issue.
Mm-hmm.
People are speculating that the reason why, since 4.16, that the computers are getting slower and slower in the benchmarks overall, is because of the fact that he ran this on an Intel. And so in a lot of the comments section, they're saying, hey, can you try this same thing on AMD? We may very well find AMD's getting slower with things as well, although I doubt it, because it seems like AMD is always behind in drivers, and it takes them 6 months to get the right drivers to work with their hardware. So at this point, we should probably be running at optimum speeds for AMD, with everything that's been out. So believe me, they both have their issues, but I do find it interesting that the later the kernel here doesn't necessarily mean more speed. And certainly with these additional mitigations that Intel has already put into place, I believe Red Hat patched it already this week, and other distros are patching for this Zombieland version 2, that you're even going to have more speed impacts, regardless if it's related to the kernel situation or not. So this is bad all the way around. And the only way to permanently fix it, because Intel has said this, that everything they've done up to this point is basically a mitigation to make the attack vector smaller, not to fix these issues from Meltdown and Spectre and then all of this.
Yeah, because it's a physical hardware issue. It's an issue with the dies and stuff that they use to make these, and the like x86 as a whole.
So again, a question for you guys: all these mitigations that are being built into the kernel now, if you have an AMD chip, you're not going to be affected. But would that mitigation, because it's in the kernel, still slow you down? Or does those mitigations only come into force when it goes, oh, I've got an Intel kernel, I better be running all of these. Or I've got an Intel chip, rather, I better be running all of these. How does those mitigations actually work? Does it slow down every machine or just Intel machines?
Yeah, it's just going to be the instruction set specific to Intel for most of these. Now, I believe one of them, and I don't recall which one, did affect AMD. Was it Spectre?
Spectre.
Yeah.
I think there's something else that also does, but Spectre is the main one that does. Spectre affects everything, all the hardware. But the majority of these issues are Intel based, because Intel had they basically just they just cut corners everywhere. And AMD basically saw that this technique was an issue, so they did it. They basically preemptively mitigated it in the hardware, and that's why it doesn't have that an issue. So because now Intel is just now getting to doing it, that we have many years to come before we actually have solutions on the hardware side.
At least for Intel, I mean, Intel's behind the ball since Core 2 Duo days. I mean, with AMD going to Zen, that was their whole redesign and rebrand and everything else. So a lot of this stuff doesn't affect them as much as it does Intel.
Yeah.
So AMD reacted quite quickly, and it possibly just happened as they were going to be retooling anyway, if that's the right word. So how long have these mitigations been known? I don't mean from 1945 when they first designed it, because I knew it was going to be all wrong then. But when it first came to the headlights, what was this, 4 or 5 years ago?
I think it was less than that, actually. I think it was like 3 years ago.
3 years ago. So how long is it going to be before Intel wakes up and goes, you know what, let's put the Intel 10 out there and then start working on the Intel 11 without these mitigations? Or is it just going to cost billions?
It depends. There's a lot of conspiracy theories out there that some of these mitigations were put into place for certain reasons. I personally don't believe that. I just believe that Intel has not refreshed their design, their labs and their the design layout for the next gen. They've been trying since 2014, is it, or even earlier, to get to the 10 nanometer, and they just can't get it to work. So they haven't released it. So once they probably do an entire refresh, if these things still exist, I'm going to call conspiracy theories true. If they redo their whole infrastructure and lineup and these issues go away, then I'm going to say likely this was just a situation in which they're trying to move to this new architecture. Obviously for Intel, they're just so massive and they have so many specialty facilities producing these dies in the silicone that, being able to just instantly stop and do a redesign on their current generation would cost them insane amounts of money. It's easier to mitigate it in software for the time being than to rebuild their entire infrastructure. So hopefully the next gen Intels that come out, I would guess we're going to see 10 nanometer at the least from Intel next year. I would hope that we would see 10 nanometer from Intel, that those would not have these mitigations in place.
Yeah, we also have messages from the kernel team. I'm pretty sure Greg KH and Linus have come out and said that they would be shocked if there was not more of these being reported in the next couple of years. Like, they basically expect at least 3 to 4 more guaranteed. And the naming of this particular one is so perfect because it's called Zombie Load, and they already mitigated it once, but it had to rise from the dead again to have another version. So,
yep. So interesting stuff. If you've noticed your PC getting a little slower, likely is. But I will be very interested in watching for Phoronix to do these same tests on AMD just to see the results there.
Absolutely.
But if you're an Intel fan, you want to wait for that refresh before you spend any money upgrading, because right now you've got a lot of mitigation stuff slowing you down.
And what could be a really simple, easy test, and I might actually try and do it, and I'll speak to Cubicle Nate about this, is within OpenSUSE, they have a section of YAST where you can go in and turn mitigation off. Okay. So I'm wondering, set up one with it on and one with it off, and then run some very simple basic tests. And does it make a difference to the speed of the machine?
Well, that would be fascinating.
Yeah,
this would be on AMD, not Intel. So yeah, I might give that a whirl and have a chat with Cubicle Nate and work out how we can do that, and then what you might have to help Ryan as to what test suite I can run to get these benchmarks for. Would Geekbench do it?
Geekbench would be a good one. I think you got to try a lot of different types of in Blender and things applications, because I understand that some of the mitigations don't affect every single aspect of your machine. So
it's also varies massively, like 3% to 35%.
Yeah. So you'd want to do like a Blender rendering. You'd probably want to try Geekbench. And what's the one you gave me, Dark One, that is so fantastic?
Unigen.
Unigen. Yeah, I would run some Unigen.
All right. Yeah. Cool. Sounds like a plan.
Well, I'm so happy you're here, Dark One, to talk about this stuff because Zeb doesn't have appreciation for pixel games, and this is shocking. It's shocked the world literally when it came out. It was all over the news. Every major news agency was talking about it. How could somebody not like pixelated games? But this one is one of those pixelated games that everyone on the planet should love. It's one of the most well-esteemed, beloved franchises from an indie developer in recent history, and it's called Shovel Knight. Mm-hmm. Have you heard of this one, Dark One?
Yes, I have. Zeb, why don't you like the pixelated art? There's so much to love about it.
My blood pressure has already gone through the roof once this show, so I'm going to refrain from rising to the bait on this one.
So Shovel Knight has some new releases out for it, some expansion packs, King of Cards and Shovel Knight Showdown. And the reason why we're highlighting it, of course, is this is an extremely popular game. 8,000 people have rated it overwhelmingly positive, to give you an example of how beloved this particular game is. It's made by Yacht Club Games, and they are bringing all of the expansion packs to Linux. We already had Shovel Knight, but they're bringing the expansion packs as well. So starting December 10th, just in time for the holidays, we get these 2 expansion packs, and they sound really cool. And I have played Shovel Knight. It is such a fun game. It's a silly concept. You literally are playing a knight with a shovel, but it is a very fun game and has a great soundtrack and all of the nostalgia and fantastic gameplay that you can expect from a game like this. So in King of Cards, you get 4 new worlds, 30 new courses, new weapons, feats, challenges, all of that stuff. So basically expanding your core gameplay that you're used to already. But then in the Showdown expansion, you get a story mode and multiplayer fighting. So this is a situation where maybe the next Gaming on Linux night, we might be doing some Shovel Knight action. That's what I'm thinking.
Oh, yeah.
And Zeb, you're going to have to... What? Zeb, don't you shake your head.
Zeb, you don't get to shake your head and weasel your way out of that one.
Yeah.
Oh, I do.
Have you played Shovel Knight, Zeb?
I just spent 30 seconds looking at it and wish I hadn't. So, no, it's just...
How dare you?
It's just not for me. I didn't like those games when I was 10 trying to play them on me BBC Micro. So why should I play them when I'm 60 on my AMD Threadripper? No, thank you.
When I was on Linux for Everyone, he asked, it's because, he was asking about games, and before Proton came out, how did I adjust to being on Linux, and did I dual boot and all that stuff? And I said, well, I stopped the dual booting at a certain point, and I just ended up finding different style of games that I loved, and indie games were always, available on Linux natively before Proton again released and opened up so many more options. And Shovel Knight, when he asked the next question, which was, what was one indie game you would recommend to get people into that genre? Shovel Knight is at the top of my list there. It's just such a fun little game there to check out. So if you're not like Zeb, he runs an NVIDIA card. He can't really handle the graphics. But if you're not like Zeb and you love this style of game, or maybe you're not even into gaming, this would be a good game that I think anybody could get out there and play and would probably enjoy. And it gets quite challenging. The boss modes and things out there are quite incredible. So most importantly, thank you to Yacht Club Games for continuing to support Linux natively.
Absolutely. It's kind of interesting how we can get so many games that are in the indie space versus the AAA games are like, well, we don't have enough people to develop for Linux, but all of these like 1 people developers and all these, it's like maybe 4 or 5 people developer companies have the ability to do it somehow.
Yeah.
But so especially thank you to Yacht Club for doing it, because this Shovel Knight is a really fun game, and especially if you like platformers.
Well, I'm so glad that I got this particular section on the games and not Shovel Knight. If you like that sort of stuff, great. However, sorry if I butcher the name, but Helvetii is coming to Linux. Now, one of the things that instantly took me on this was the graphics. The graphics are superb. Mm-hmm. And then I found out they're actually hand-drawn. So the love that's gone into this game is astonishing. So there's another great-looking game that is promising Linux support, and it's called Helvetii. Helvetii is a 2D character action game made with hand-drawn art and animation, based around Celtic and Gaelic mythology. So it's currently being funded on Kickstarter, but has already reached some of its funding goals. So the best part is when Gaming on Linux reached out to them in order to confirm support, the developer stated they've received overwhelming demand for it and went on to add, supporting Linux is actually very little work on our end, and we do have the ability to test it. We thought that we might as well do it. So that's great news from a company that's just said, do you know what? It's going to be a little bit more work, but not too great. So let's just throw it out there, everybody.
Yep.
So going out there in a kind way and letting the devs know that you want a Linux version of the games, especially indie games, you're getting the attention of the companies and helping bring more games to Linux natively. But going back to this game, I actually surprised myself as to how deep I went into finding out about this and jumping on their website. And part of the Kickstarter, the fascination is, as they are bringing on new characters, they are then showing you those moves that those characters can do, what part they're going to play in the game, and you as a player, if you're a risk taker, then you should navigate towards this type of person because you've got to become really good at combination kicks. And this is one of those games where it would drive me crazy because if I can't do shift left, alt F4, K -2 plus enter within half a second, then I've already lost the fight. Or I could go quite easily and then walk through there with this dirty great big knight and just hit people with a sledgehammer. That works for me. That's much easier. That's just hit. But you've got all of that complexity going into this game, and I can't emphasize it more. It's hand drawn.
Yeah.
So how many frames of it's mind boggling how much hard work has got to go into this so even if I never buy it, I really am tempted to just go and jump on like Kickstarter and donate some money, just because the level of work that's gone into this is just astonishing.
Yeah, this is one of those games that you look at the graphics and you realize that when people say gaming is art, that this is a perfect example of that, right? I mean, it's mind-boggling gorgeous. The colors are so deep in the various scenes, but still clear, right? They're not trying to hide things with the dark colors and the dark dungeons and things that you can end up in. I have to believe, Dark One, this game is so up your alley, it's ridiculous. They might as well call it Dark One's game.
From looking at it, to me, it reminds me of like Salt and Sanctuary.
Mm-hmm.
There's another game, I think it's called Earthlock, which is kind of in a similar vein. But it, like the art style, like the hand-drawn backgrounds and like the actual character animation stuff, that reminds me more of like Bloodstained, which is like a Castlevania game that came out a while ago.
Yep.
But the backgrounds, like the way the backgrounds look, almost remind me of like the hand drawn stuff in Dex.
Interesting.
As far as like the level of quality.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me, there's no real price you can place on that kind of art, like this passion project. And that to me really is what this is, because passion projects, especially for video games, are so rare to find and have so few games that are like shown a lot of love to the attention to detail with that like kind of hand-drawn animation stuff and whatnot. So I'm definitely interested. This is already on the wish list. So.
Yeah. No, I think you make a brilliant point there, because so many projects, especially from big developers, are just based on a formula. Hey, right now MMORPGs are hot, so we're going to drop an MMORPG, and we know we need to have these certain elements. And then from the indie game developers, which is something I really appreciated when I came to Linux, because before that I was just a AAA hunter, right? I'd just look for what's the next AAA game coming out. But at least before Proton and things launched in Linux, I was forced to really look at the indie games more deeply, and that's what I found is, yes, there's a lot of bad ones out there, make no mistake. But the ones that are good, that are truly the passion projects, there's nothing else like them out there. And they're just gorgeous and beautiful. And you could tell this is something that somebody has imagined for years and years and years, is finally getting to create. This looks like that type of game. I hope they meet the standards we're talking it up to, because obviously it's not out yet. But I'm just so happy that they're willing to put this out on Linux, because based on what I'm seeing so far and listening to it, this is going to be one to beat. So in our software spotlight of the week, this is one that I actually discovered at the top of the show when we started recording this, that this even existed, because Zeb and Michael have been hiding it from me this entire time. And I'm very angry at them for this.
Sorry.
But I'm going to cover it here. I'm going to cover it here in the software spotlight. The tool is called Drill. And this application has an incredibly fast search algorithm for finding, locating files, folders, applications on your machine. It's absolutely beautiful, easy to use, and I loved it from the second I opened it. But since I've only been able to use it for the last, 15 minutes before we actually kicked into the show, Michael, tell us about this tool you hid from everybody.
Okay, so hiding is a little bit ridiculous to claim. I didn't hide it. I just didn't tell you about it. Very different.
But it was on Twinnel.
Yes,
So
okay, that's true.
you
I didn't tell you. I
learn.
didn't tell Ryan directly, but he mistakenly didn't watch the particular episode of This Week in Linux that I talked about it on, which was many months ago. I don't remember when I did it. But Drill is a really cool application because it's a file searcher, and it takes its idea and its inspiration from Search Everything, which is available on Windows, and it's been a really popular search tool on Windows. And it's very similar in the way that they lay it out. It's similar to how it works, and it's a really cool application in general. But they provide an app image to make it easy to use on whatever you want. It is based on GTK, so it's not the best toolkit, but it's still a good toolkit for this purpose anyway. And what's really cool about it is that the algorithm is very different. So like most file searchers, for some reason, use depth-first files algorithms. This uses a breadth-first algorithm. And the way this changes it is it like, instead of most people don't use multi-subfolders under subfolders under subfolders and everything. Like I do actually, but most people don't do that. So this is a way for, it makes it more speedy based on the way it checks the files. And then it also does it in a multi-threaded way. So oddly enough, a lot of file managers don't have multi-threading. Some do, but not all of them do. And so having multi-threading makes it even more fast. And then
you love this application, right?
I think it's quite awesome, yes. I mean,
and it's GTK. So you love GTK.
That is not what I would take
More
from
than
this.
cute.
That's not what I would take from this discussion. However, Drill is a really cool application, and it's super fast, and it does actually exclude certain file systems like root folders aren't included in it because why would you be searching for that stuff? But they actually have a GTK version, but they also have a command line thing. But they're also working on incurses, which is gonna be really cool when they get the incurses when done. I think the Drill is a pretty cool application, and if you ever need to look for your files really quickly, or if you have a lot of files let's say you have a lot of music files that you want to look through or whatever, you could use Drill to find that kind of stuff. I think it's pretty cool. And
wait a minute, Michael. This just in. I'm looking at the chat comments here in Zoom, and I have just found out that Dark One also knew about this app. And might have been the one that recommended it to you that ended up in your show, he's stating.
I don't know what you're talking about, Ryan.
This is a conspiracy
It's possible,
theory
though.
against
It's
me.
possible. I do not remember at all where I found it. So it is quite possible that Dark One might have done it.
Now everybody in chat saying they knew about it too. You know what? You're all fired.
Well, it's because they actually watched This Week in Linux. So there you go.
I watch it. I help with the notes sometimes. This one time I missed one episode and I'm abused. How many times have I been on the phone with you? I'm like, Michael, let me search for this. They gave you the opportunity to be like, hey, are you using Drill? But no, never comes up.
Well,
Never
it came
comes
up today. So you're welcome.
Somebody said their Pomeranian knew about it.
Wow. Okay.
You know what?
Well, Ryan, if you had actually drilled down and searched for it,
Oh, well done.
Yeah.
Well
See,
played.
exactly.
Before we leave on that rather awful note, what we will say is that it does have some very minor limitations in as much as that it won't work or doesn't appear to work with attached storage. So it's only going to work on your local file system. And I don't know whether it works on the whole file system or just your home folder. So
It should work on all of the systems, and it also should say multiple. It should support multiple disks because they actually have a structure saying that they have multi-threaded for different disks. But I'm not sure what the
it
issue.
doesn't appear to be on my machine, so maybe you need a SIM link to those other to those other disks rather than it physically picking them up in your machine.
Yeah. Hopefully the developer of
something to
Drill
look
can
into.
answer these questions if they would like to. So send us an email if we're doing something wrong.
Yeah, and come explain to me as the developer of the tool why you didn't tell me about it.
So, funny enough, finding things that to promote on the show is something that that Ryan had accidentally done today, and I had accidentally done something similar a couple days ago regarding Telegram. Because this is a tip. Our tip and trick is related to Telegram because there's something I was trying to do on a different application and accidentally found a feature in Telegram. So when in most applications you can do Control plus and minus for zooming. So this is a extra bonus tip. But once you have you're done doing whatever you need to do to zoom in and out, you can reset a zoom by hitting Control 0. And I had accidentally had Telegram selected on my desktop rather than the thing I was trying to reset, and it sent me directly to the save messages section on my Telegram account. So I found there were shortcuts, and it goes beyond that because you can have the Control 1 through 5 to quickly jump between all of your pinned groups or chats or whatever you have pinned there. So you have 1 through 5 to be whatever you pinned, and then Control 0 to go to the save messages. And this is surprisingly a lot of it saved me a lot of time since I found it. And
that's really cool. I'm so glad you just discovered it. I've known it for 24 years.
Well, Telegram hasn't existed for 24 years, but I appreciate your attempt.
I'm sure we meant 24 hours.
I think what you meant was that your Pomeranian knew about it.
Yeah.
But there's also another thing I found recently for the same thing. This is a feature that a lot of people don't know about, but you can do scheduled messaging in Telegram, which is something I've been like begging for the moment I found Telegram, really, because scheduled messages allows you to write out a message to whoever you want and then schedule it for a later time to actually send it to them rather than doing it immediately. And
like I can set up a bunch of Michael, are you awake to go out at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m.
Right, you could do that, and that's what do not disturb mode is for. So that this is actually really cool because it allows you to do that kind of thing. Or if you have someone you talk to like Zeb and like 6 hours or 7 hours difference depending on the time of the year, or whatever, I could send a message to him that's not rude like Ryan would send to me, and we could schedule it in a way that's easier. But they also have another feature on top of that allows you to send the message without sending a notification signal. So you can actually send it, but then not send a notification thing, so it won't make a sound or whatever, regardless of what time it is.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool.
I see a little tutorial video coming up here.
Yeah,
Maybe.
Michael will get to it next year.
Yeah,
It's a shame it won't be back till 2022, but hey.
There you go. Anyway,
but you guys are making that time frame really short.
Yeah. Well, so the actual Telegram features, the scheduled messaging and sending the signals are only available on the mobile apps, unfortunately. And I can go ahead and do the tutorial really quickly because all you have to do in order to do that is to press the send button and hold it down until the little pop-up dialog to do the other thing is. So the shortcuts, unfortunately, only available on desktop. The no signal and the scheduled messages only available on the mobile. But hey, at least they're there now. So there you go.
They need to converge that and then go fully open source, and Telegram will basically take over the world.
Yes, I agree with all that.
Yeah. So a big thank you to each and every one of you for supporting us by watching or listening to Destination Linux. However you do it, thank you so much for your continued support. And it's important to know that we absolutely, undoubtedly love our patrons that support this show. And you can join and become a patron for just $1. It's darn near free, and you get all these additional perks, like you get the unedited version of the show that Michael posts, or you can join us live when we're recording, which is typically on Sundays, and you get extra content that is not released. So definitely consider being a supporter of the show. And speaking of support, you can become a part of the community by going to destinationlinux.network and joining our forums and our new Mumble server. And so Mumble server is a great place for you to go if you're playing some games or you just want to chat with people. Sometimes things can't be just handled in text. The discourse forums are blowing up, which is fantastic problem for us to have. We've got the amount of people who are signing up is just skyrocketing. So thank you so much for supporting those forums, because there's nothing worse than going to forums and it being a ghost zone. So thankfully, we don't have that problem. We're getting lots of support on the forums. There are lots of fantastic topics and things. And so we like to join into the discussions there as well. And you have Linux for everyone, DOS Geek, This Week in Linux, Ask Noah Show, Tux Digital, Zebedee Boss, and the new content coming from DLN Extend, which is available there for you. We have so much content for you. You really have nothing else you can get done for the rest of the week except listen to our shows.
Absolutely. So please get back to us and provide some feedback or ask any questions you may have. There are numerous methods that you can do this via. You can do it email, comments@destinationlinux.org, our Telegram group, our Discord, our Discourse, Twitter, Mastodon, and other ways that you can find that are on our website, destinationlinux.org/contact. So please keep the comments and questions coming. We love to read them and hear of ways that we might be able to improve the show or just a particular subject that you want to talk about. And finally, as Ryan has already mentioned, don't forget to join our Mumble server, because sometimes chatting to someone about a particular problem is so much quicker than doing it over text. So chat with the community, set up gaming sessions. It doesn't have to be an official one that we within the Destination Linux network have done. You guys can just throw up an impromptu gaming session and see who joins in. So enjoy that networking.
And if you want more content from us, the fun doesn't stop here. We also have our own channels that you can check out. So you can, of course, go to destinationlinux.network to see all the channels there. But if you want to go to directly, you can go to youtube.com/DOSGeek to find Ryan's content, where he fills your brains on hardware, software, and all things Linux. Especially check out the latest Pinebook stuff he's been doing for the Pinebook Pro. You can check out youtube.com/ZebedeeBoss, where you can get content from Zeb, where he's playing some games on his Zebedee Gaming YouTube channel. You can find the This Week in Linux podcast, the one that Ryan didn't watch for the particular topic of drill. And that's an in-depth weekly Linux GNUs podcast that's available at tuxdigital.com and also destinationlinux.network, of course. And you can check out Noah on his weekly talk radio show, the Ask Noah Show, at 6 p.m. Central on Tuesdays. And, of course, you can go check out our Dark One's guest host content by going to YouTube, actually, tuxdigital.com/darkone. That's easier. It's just a little bit of a fair warning. There is a little bit of a not safe for work issue there. Anyway,
as far as language goes,
right?
Just to be
language goes, basically. But the content is really informative and really interesting. So if you want to check it out, we have a link in the show notes there. So since Noah was the host of this episode, he can't be here for doing the outro. We're going to hand it off to the guest host. So Darkwin, take it away.
So everybody have a great week, and remember that the journey itself is just as important as the destination.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.